From London, this is the Standard Podcast, and I'm Mark Blunden. Coming up in this episode, has the capital's post-COVID return to the office rush stalled? But first, a government minister has left the door open to big tax hikes in next week's budget that hit high earners on more than £100,000, as he refused to define whether or not these high earners were working people under Labour's definition. And it comes after Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer ruled out increases to the rates of income tax, VAT and national insurance in Labour's manifesto, and appeared to further caveat this so it only applied to working people. So with the budget next week, what hints have we had so far? And what if you're one of the lucky few on six figures? The London Standard's political editor Nick Cecil joins us now from Parliament with the details. Nick, what are you reporting on Monday about how the budget might impact high earners?
The Care Minister, Stephen Kinnock, was on the media round this morning, and he was asked, if you earn over £100,000 a year, are you classified as a working person? Now, obviously you are working, but does that meet Labour's definition of a working person, of working people? And he repeatedly dodged this question. So if you're earning over £100,000, which obviously if you are, you're very much one of the better off people in society, then you could expect that you may be targeted quite heavily in the upcoming budget. We've also had a definition in the past from Keir Starmer about what he views a working person is. His definition was someone who earns their living, relies on public services, and don't really have the ability to write a cheque when they get into trouble. So again, there's no clear definition, but what is quite clear is that if you're wealthy, and many Londoners are wealthy, then there'll be some significant tax rises coming your way in the budget on October the 30th.
And what about everyone else? Do we know any further details that have been leaking in previous days?
Yes, well, one more thing which has emerged is the freezing of thresholds for paying income tax. And this is described as a stealth tax. So for the Treasury to get more money from income tax, they don't have to raise the actual basic rate or the high rates. They can just freeze a threshold at which people pay this tax. So, for example, the high rate, the threshold is £50,000, 270. And so if you earn more than that, you'll pay 40p in the pound. And if you freeze the threshold, then more and more people will be dragged into paying that high rate in something which is called fiscal drag. Now, the suggestion over the weekend is that Rachel Reeves is going to extend this freeze, which is already set to last 6 years, for a further 2 years. And if you look at the small print or read it very carefully, their manifesto, the Labour manifesto, the commitment is only about not increasing income tax rates. It doesn't make any such pledge on the thresholds.
And on government spending cuts, what do we know about who or what departments thus far are in the Chancellor's crosshairs?
You've had reports in recent days that Angela Rayner, who's the Commuter's Housing Secretary, Louise Haigh, the Transport Secretary, and Shabana Mahmood, who is the Justice Secretary, are amongst cabinet ministers who have protested to number 10 about the scale of cuts they're being asked to identify, or potential cuts. And what tends to happen before budgets is that the Treasury will say, I want you to show me 2 or 3 scenarios of how you can make cuts in your budget, or savings. They call it savings. To the man in the street, it's very much cuts. And it appears that some ministers are being asked to make such significant cuts that they've tried to go over Rachel Reeves' head to Keir Starmer to plead their case. Now, there's no sign that there's any division between the Prime Minister and the Chancellor on this. And unlike in the old days between Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, when there was a continual ongoing rift. So it doesn't look like going to Keir Starmer has helped the case of these cabinet ministers.
Any hopes for silver linings or rabbits being pulled out of hats amidst the gloom?
I don't think this is a silver lining budget. This is a budget to fix public finances and then to try to find the funds to invest in the longer term to boost some of Britain's public services, for example, the NHS. So the suggestion is that the Chancellor is seeking a £40 billion package, mainly from tax rises, but also some savings in other departments, basically so that she can try to get Britain's economy growing solidly again and find more money for public services such as the health service, which certainly NHS is going to need more and more money due to an ageing population and other factors such as technological advances. But the question about the NHS, which many people are asking is, if you just pour more money into the NHS, will it actually improve services? Because productivity in some parts of the NHS has actually gone down despite getting more money. So Wes Streeting, the health secretary, is saying very much like Gordon Brown did in 2002, that any extra money must come alongside reforms, basically so that money is better spent and delivers better care for patients.
Let's go to the ads coming up. Has London's forecast return to the office surge stalled? We'll see you back here in just a minute. Welcome back. Now, according to the latest passenger numbers from Transport for London, the post-pandemic return to the office may have stalled. The Standard's transport editor Ross Lydall reports TfL finance chiefs have warned commuter numbers are growing at a snail's pace. But it actually comes amid a surge in construction work, with some 2.5 million square feet of office space being built in the first quarter of this year. To find out what this means for the capital's transport network, TfL's budget and those all-important fare prices, we're joined by Ross Lydall now. Ross, can you kick us off with what you've discovered?
Well, it's not quite the case that alarm bells are ringing, but certainly there is a sort of modest level of concern about what may potentially be a sort of complete slowdown in the great return to work. Now, Transport for London has one of the best sort of data sets in the entire country in terms of how we travel and where we travel to. Thanks to the Oyster card and contactless travel, its ticket barriers tell TfL chiefs exactly who's using the tube and when they're using it, which journeys they're making and at what time they're travelling. And the latest data shows that over the past 3 months, so over the summer, by and large, there has only been a 1.1% increase in the number of journeys made on the London travel network. Now, that might still sound okay, but it compares to 9% last year and also to the prediction of 6% this year. So what it means is that TfL is way below predictions, and this has also had quite a big knock-on impact on its finances. Since the start of April, there have been 52 million fewer journeys than TfL expected, and that has resulted in £78 million less in its coffers than it was hoping for. And that has meant that actually, as we speak right now, it is currently £16 million in deficit. Now, that's a small amount compared to an organisation where it spends sort of several £billion a year, but nonetheless, a rather unwelcome position to be in.
And in terms of that disconnect between what TfL projected versus reality, this seems to be significant.
It certainly could be if this continues. Now, what TfL says is that September is a key month. Obviously, September has now passed. But in terms of predicting the future in terms of travel habits and travel demand, September is the one sort of bellwether month of the year when they know if people are actually going to come back into the workplace, into central London. It's obviously when schools return after the summer holidays. So we will find out in a month or so's time whether this trend over the summer of things being quieter than expected continues, or whether it's just a sort of blip over several months. The issue for TfL is that it does its sums at the start of the year and then predicts all its spending on the income it expects to receive. It now has to essentially wash its face financially because it doesn't get government subsidy like it used to back in the old days when Boris Johnson was mayor. Boris Johnson traded away this subsidy for changes in tax rules. So on the basic level, TfL's coffers are not overloaded. The piggy bank is starting to rattle a bit. There's some space in there, and they could do with some pound coins being dropped in it pronto.
And is it too early to be able to analyse what the long-term impact might be for future fares?
It's probably too early to say for fares. The fares decision is the decision that the Mayor, Sadiq Khan, will make around probably January time now, because the fares won't be due to rise until March. Previously, they rose on the sort of 1st or 2nd of January, but since the pandemic, they have gone up in March time rather than January. What it has meant immediately, though, is that TfL is already looking to make savings. So where there are programmes where the money has been underspent, is then saying, thank you very much, we won't go and sort of splash too much cash just now. We'll sort of take the benefit that some money's unspent, and that can help us to rebalance the books. I think what's interesting here as well is that in terms of which modes of travel are doing well and which aren't doing well. So, for example, tube travel is up about 2% year on year. Bus journeys is only up about 1% year on year. Now, bus journeys have been a long-standing issue because of the number of buses that get stuck in traffic, and that's the biggest sort of determinant of whether people want to travel by bus, is whether they're going to be delayed. In terms of the other lines, the Lizzie line, the Elizabeth line, is up 13.5% year on year. So again, hugely popular, although not without its issues, because there have been ongoing hiccups with sort of signal failures and so on. The DLR is down 3.5%. Again, there have been big issues with the new DLR trains not being able to be brought in, and that has obviously put off some passengers. And finally, the Croydon tram, it's just a small part of the network, but it is down 20% year on year. So this is where TfL is clocking up the journeys or not, as the case may be.
And that's The Standard. For the latest news, head over to standard.co.uk. This podcast is back tomorrow at 4 p.m.